This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
Ave Maria!
Can you imagine how exciting this would be if it wasn't other stuff happening?
Season 1 of 2023, just top notch.
You cannot copyright game mechanics, only their expression.
Open RPG creative license.
So there is no company that is as big as Wizards of the Coast in this space. But once you combine Paizo and Green Ronin and Chaosium and any number of these huge names, you do start to get a pretty huge presence.
Welcome to my world. Let me share my stress with you.
Back
Have we
to
gone
a past
live yet?
life. Yeah,
Are
we have.
people listening to
we've
this?
gone live.
All that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the number one tabletop RPG podcast in all the spheres, every plane of existence. They tune into the Eldritch Lorecast, even those that haven't had radios invented yet. It's kind of like a Flintstones dinosaur situation where, four dinosaurs get together and basically quote the Eldritch Lorecast from script. That's how it works. Anyway, if you haven't tuned out yet, my name is Ben Byrne, and I am here, as always, with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake. And James, I have to ask you, what is one of your favorite third-party supplements for 5e?
Wow. Way to hit me with a hard question right off the bat. There's so many good ones. I'll ignore ones that I've contributed to because I have fond feelings about many of those. It's got to be Kobold Press's Tome of Beasts. What a hard-hitting, incredible little monster book that is. That might be the book that got me into loving third-party D&D style books.
You've completely stolen my answer because I was going to say the same thing.
Get wrecked, Ben Byrne.
It feels like a benchmark of quality in terms of monsters for 5th edition specifically, in the way that those stat blocks are so flavoursome and yet not always incredibly dense with text. Like some of the abilities do a lot of things with very little words, so they are easy to run without being simple, overly simplistic. And every a special ability that's given to a monster, like if you look in the base monster manual, the difference between an owlbear and an ogre and the cyclops, that's the word I was looking for, and an etin, all these kind of mid-tier beefy monsters is a flying speed or slashing and bludgeoning damage, and which fundamentally they're big, they hit things, and that's kind of what they do. Whereas the Tome of Beasts, and Creature Codex, both of them just have a way of here's an extra little thing that really makes it feel like this monster more, this couldn't be any other monster except for this one. My one caveat is that Tome of Beasts has 5 different versions of Lady that drowned in pond and now wants you to drown in pond also.
This is a very interesting thing, and it's something that kickstarted RPG manuals, especially monster manuals, sometimes suffer from, and it's backer submissions. Backer submissions, I think, are great, but they do kind of lend themselves to everyone has the same great idea, so how do we kind of sort of differentiate them?
See, I just feel like we should sort out this issue, get some fences around those ponds. Clearly they're a hazard.
Right? Right.
Too many women drowning in ponds.
I dead set had a warning sign near a pond that had a drowned lady in it, and the players just ignored it.
I was in charge on some of the Kobold Press tomes of Beasts and or Creature Codexes of actually taking those submissions and turning them into monsters. And there were some absolutely amazing ideas, but there were some other interesting ones that required a bit of fine-tuning. Even the idea required a great bit of fine-tuning to get them into a form which might be usable in your average 5e D&D game. So, God bless gamers, because we are quite an interesting crew.
Shawn, do you have a favorite third-party supplement that it might be hard for you to pick one that you didn't work on? But if you did have a favorite, what would it be?
I've got so many favorites. I'm going to give you 3 right off the top of my head. I'm going to give you Engine Publishing. They are a group that made a bunch of system agnostic guides for game masters. They have things such as Eureka, 510 adventure plots, Masks, 1,000 memorable NPCs, Never Unprepared, how to plan your campaigns, Unframed, the art of improvisation. Whole series of great stuff, some of them written by one or two people, some of them written by luminaries in the industry. You can find all of those on DriveThruRPG. System agnostic, check them out. Alligator Alley and Rich Lescouflair made Espergenesis, a 5e science fantasy game. If you want to scratch that sci-fi fantasy itch, but you like 5e, check it out. They've got a player's handbook, monster manual, their analogies of those 3 books, plus adventures, plus a full campaign or 2. It's all there waiting for you. Last but not least, shout out to Ann Gregerson, who on the DMs Guild made 2 lines of products that were amazing. The first is Monster Loot, which she goes through all the books, all the monsters, all the adventures, and says, here's an alternative to some of the loot that you can get from monsters. She also did something called Bloodied and Bruised, which adds the bloodied condition and other abilities to monsters based on, as they lose hit points, they gain these extra abilities. If you are having trouble, making adventures hard enough for your players, check that out. Shawn out.
And he's out, folks. Dael Kingsmill, if you had some favorite third-party supplements.
So, I mean, I feel like it's so predictable by now that I tend to, my fatal flaw, my hubris is that, or my hamartia, is that I tend to just make all my own stuff, my own third-party stuff, because that's just who I am and what I'm like. But, and I can say this because I don't technically work for y'all, but I do think that the one that I most regularly go to and use without changing anything is the Grim Hollow Player's Guide. I love so many of the subclasses that are in there. I love taking them and dropping them into my games. So, thank you to Ghostfire for that. Other than a Ghostfire thing, the MCDM Arcadia magazines have been really, really cool. Lots of just so much varied stuff from so many different perspectives that really just fascinating sort of design insights that you get from that magazine.
Dael out. And I think I've done it a few times now in previous episodes, but I just want to give a quick shout out as well to Dungeons of Drakkenheim. It is, I haven't run it yet, but it is like one of the very few campaigns, because I tend to homebrew most things, that I've looked at and just been like, I want to run this basically as is, without any changes, which is pretty rare for me. Usually I like to recontextualize things. It's been a 2 weeks in the tabletop RPG industry, hasn't it? Huh? How we feeling, folks? It's
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Ben.
Me too. Like, actively need to leave usually once I finish work, I stay online for a bit. Actively need to stop, like go and play some video games or something the last 2 weeks.
I have relatives who have no interest in D&D who have contacted me and been like, wow, what's all this about? That's where we're at.
Yeah.
I was watching a Legal Eagle video today. Yes.
So, funny thing about that, and I told you all this story before we went live, but I still think it's funny, is my partner, we watch Legal Eagle every now and again, particularly if we want to get context on, some current affair that's happening, particularly in the States. And when I started explaining to her why people were mad on Twitter, she was like, I wonder if Legal Eagle will do a video on this. And I was like, no way, he's not going to do it. Like, he does government level, legal disputes or reacting to Netflix shows. There's no way he's going to pick this up. And the next day was the day that Legal Eagle tweeted at Matt Colville. So shut my mouth. And she was very pleased. We watched that video together. But for folks that, have been living in some faraway fantasy land, which probably describes most tabletop RPG players. But for folks that don't know, there was a purported leak of the OGL, the Open Gaming License 1.1, that went online and for various reasons was not popular. We made a sort of shorter statement about it last week. But Ghostfire Gaming has made a more extensive statement about it on our blog, which there will hopefully be a link in the Twitch chat if you are watching this live, or it will be below in the show notes. If you want to go and see that statement, we might touch on that a little bit right now. But basically, the community has been in an uproar because of the purported changes in this leaked OGL 1.1, which has had many dominoing effects. I don't even know. Like, this has just been an ever evolving and rapidly evolving, often situation. How y'all doing? How do we do we even want to talk about this at this stage?
Doing?
Yeah.
You're right. It's been a hell of a week, hell of a 2 weeks. But if I'm being honest with you, I feel a lot better today than I have for the past few days, knowing that, Ghostfire has a stance that we've kind of put our stick in the mud, and we're moving forward from there. That's the wrong analogy.
Well, I just feel, it works, but I just feel like stick in the mud has been claimed.
I know, yeah, that's not really what I meant to say. But now that we're moving forward, now that we have a plan of attack, so to speak, now that we're not just kind of running around like headless chickens, it feels like the just sort of broad stress of, oh no, the world's falling apart, is being kind of focused into something actionable. And that's what makes me feel less like I'm losing my mind.
For folks that haven't read the statement, and maybe you are right now, but just to kind of assuage a couple of questions, any Kickstarter that Ghostfire Gaming has launched previously will still remain as a 5e product under OGL 1.0a. Unless for any reason that's completely beyond our control. That can't be the case in future if something else develops, but that is our plan going forward, is to absolutely deliver on what we promised with those. And that our Valican Kickstarter, which is coming up, Grim Hollow Valika, yes, that is still going to be a 5e Kickstarter under OGL 1.0a as well at this stage. It's basically 90% of the way there. Which has been an influencing factor on that decision, but also just because it would be a shame to just hold back the intense Viking beauty that Shawn and James have poured into that thing. I cannot express, just quickly, how excited I am for this Kickstarter. I've been writing the script for the videos that we're going to do. This is going to sound very sales pitchy, but I'm dead set honest and a little bit peeved that this Kickstarter is going to have the shadow of this uproar kind of cast over it. And I hope not, because 5e still exists, as a system that you can play. Your books are still there. And if you are a fan of Grim Hollow and 5e, this is going to be one heck of a Kickstarter.
Viking beauty. And I mean, that's kind of the thing that has everyone up in arms at the very root of all of this, right? Is that when third-party companies like ours, when gaming companies that publish TTRPGs make their own game, 9 times out of 10, they don't sell very well. And we all love D&D. We love 5th edition. And because that game has market dominance, and we love it, we want to create stuff for it because we know that it will get in front of people and people will play it and people will love it. Whereas, people might still love it if we published it for Fate or for another game that has an open license or for a game that we were to make in-house. But because it's not D&D, it doesn't have that sort of first step already completed. It's a lot of effort for people to get into this thing that they otherwise would love unconditionally. And so, for us to have to step away from 5e, it's a major blow. It's Wizards upending their own apple cart. And we're all along for the ride and we're all feeling the side effects of it.
The apples is us.
Yeah, so we are the apples. Right. I mean, I got out of the business world and started doing games full time because I wanted to do my little elf game, right? I this is what I want to do. I don't want to have all these business worries and business concerns. But in the end, I did join a business. And so the worst thing you can do to a business is pull the carpet out from under that business and make everything up in the air, because we need to plan ahead of time. And, until we have that ground put back under us in some way, we need to move forward with what we know. And so we are moving forward with what we know, and maybe the ground will be put back under us again. And if that's the case, then we can make decisions based on that new reality. But until that happens, we have to be prepared for all contingencies. So, that's where I stand on this.
But just taking a moment to just sort of be amazed at what unfolded, because similar to my Legal Eagle anecdote, I really thought and wondered if this would remain kind of the upset around 1.1 would remain kind of storm in a teacup on Twitter. And that is where it would stay within the bounds of the industry itself, the folks who are creating. And so it's been great to get support from kind of the wider spread fans, kind of weighing in their opinions on this matter at very least. And it was when, again, my wife was scrolling through TikTok, and like every third TikTok, she's like, what's an OGL? Like, what's going on here? Because every third thing is like about something and I was like, oh, wow. If this thing's like penetrating into TikTok in like that widespread of a manner, this is going far.
For me, the first sign was when Charlie from Moist Critical did a video on it. I was like, oh no, we're about to hit the mainstream. And now we're in The Guardian, we're in Forbes.
Yes. Yeah, we are. It is all over the shop now. This has made a splash in a big bad way. It's
honestly exciting. If it weren't so devastating to our industry, I'd be very delighted by all of this sort of.
If we were not all apples soaring through the sky,
not apples.
If we were just bystanders in the market, it'd be really fascinating. I feel a bit like a bystander in the market. I feel bad that I'm kind of, I'm on the outside enough that I can enjoy it a little bit.
For sure.
Every day I would wake up and there would be something new happening.
Divorced from the real lives that are impacted by this, and I felt the same way back in 2013 when the consoles there was the new console generation coming in from the PS3 to the PS4 and the Xbox to the Xbox One. Not that I'd make a direct analogy between these two circumstances, but just the like industry upheaval, just the intense amount of news that's coming out every day, the high emotion, the uncertainty of what's going to happen, with all the pieces thrown up into the air. It looks like one of them is going to land first, but this other one might be heavier, so it comes down quicker. I don't know. That's a weird analogy. But my point being, divorced from any of like the personal feelings, it is exciting as heck to watch this unfold. It is just like, oh my God.
It's spectacle. It's drama. The image in my head, by the way, is these apples slowly spinning, slow motion. Ave Maria.
That's going in the teaser at the start, I bet you.
It's just, it's like I did my live stream last week to talk about my feelings on the OGL. And I felt like I got everything out that I possibly could. By the end of that stream, we were talking about fast food restaurants because I'd said everything I could think of about the OGL. And then the next morning I wake up and it's like, Paizo has gathered all the biggest names you've ever heard of. And it's like, whoa, okay. Apparently more was ready to go. Okay.
Yeah. Season 1 of 2023, just top notch, terrifying as heck, but like excitement, the suspense, 10 out of 10 would season again, would watch again. Maybe.
That is kind of the delightful thing about it, is that as everything kind of falls apart, you can see people finding ways to support one another, right? It's like that classic Fred Rogers quote, right? When things are going bad, look for the helpers. Well, there's helpers all over here. Everyone is looking for a way to band together and support one another.
Yeah.
And, of course, in the midst of that, I have no doubt that there are opportunists looking to make some quick money off of it as well. But, the cozy part of my heart likes to think that all in all, we have this feeling that we're all in it together. We're all here to support each other.
Comparing this to a TV season made me think of Game of Thrones, And when people are like, things are happening in kind of an uncertain way, do you think Game of Thrones as a term is going to like transcend the TV series as just an expression for meaning like time of upheaval? All right, moving on. Let us take a moment, though, because, as we've already hinted at, and as most folks listening to this podcast are likely already to know, there is a lot of kind of information and news folding out of this, including MCDM now have announced that they are working on their own tabletop RPG. Kobold Press have announced that they are raising the black flag, so to speak, and are working on their own tabletop RPG called Black Flag. Kobold Press, Paizo, a couple of other folks have talked about the Orc, which is the open RPG creative license, if I'm getting that correct just off the top of my head, which is meant to be a license that can be used that if you want, to attach an RPG that you're working on to the license. I think Paizo, correct me if any of your understandings on this are different to mine, because some of this legal stuff starts to confuse me a little bit. But Paizo could attach Pathfinder 2e to it. Black Flag looks like it will definitely be involved in it. And basically, it functions similarly to the OGL, but for any system that wants to, make use of the Orc, as they are calling it, which is intended to create a resource for third parties and independent creators to always have an RPG that they can use as the base to kind of explore their own creativity.
We really don't know ultimately what the Orc is going to be. We don't really know what Black Flag is going to be. We don't know if they're connected. They look like they have a lot in common. They look like they might be the same thing. One might be a game that uses the Orc's sort of SRD. We have ideas, but it's not clear. And I think to really drill down to what the Orc intends to be, we can actually go back to that Legal Eagle video that you were talking about earlier, because he makes a really great bit of explanation about what the actual use case of the OGL ought to have been, or may have been intended to be. Because as he argues in that video, there's a large difference between copyright and trademark, legally speaking, and how that pertains to game rules, without getting into a sort of paraphrase of a paraphrase of legal advice. Basically, you cannot copyright game mechanics, only their expression, which means that unless you're literally quoting the player's handbook, etc., you can essentially make a carbon copy of D&D, and as long as you are not directly lifting from the player's handbook, you're in the clear. And if that sounds confusing and full of potential pitfalls, it is. And the OGL is there to be a safe harbor, sort of assurance from Wizards of the Coast to everyone else that wants to make D&D compatible stuff that, hey, we are letting you know right now, you can do all of this stuff and we will not pursue anything legally against you. We're just going to state it right there. We'll never go at you with legal action if you kind of stay within these boundaries. You could probably go beyond them and be legally in the clear, but do you have the money to lawyer up and fight that out with us? And so if the OGL is no longer a safe harbor, if we can no longer trust implicitly in the OGL, then it's essentially worthless as a document and everyone had better lawyer up, unless another safe harbor is created. And the Orc is intended to be that new safe harbor. And, even if you want to play 5e, if you want to make for 5e, there's kind of this feeling that any port in a storm is a good one. And I think that the Orc is very certainly going to be a port in this storm.
So functionally, somebody could, create a game where instead of strength, dex, and con, you have like force, swiftness, and toughness, something like that. Just, And then this morning I saw Colville tweet out, he's like, we're thinking the new stats for our game might be something like, might. And I was like, okay, all right, I see.
What did he say? Was it might, agility, and toughness? I mean, if I was going to make a fantasy RPG, whether or not it was going to be a D&D clone, might, agility, and toughness would be the words I would use for
honestly,
those things.
I think they are probably, particularly, I think intuition was what seemed to take the place of wisdom. And I think that probably is a better word for what wisdom sort of mechanically represents within the rule system of 5e at least. Who knows if that's what they will intend it for the MCDM specific game. But it's as a fallout to this, as a complete kind of like side effect of everything that's happened here, it is cool to see third-party companies flexing their creative muscle and see players look around to try new systems, try new games, try new companies that they might have heard about but just not really felt like they wanted to stray away from WotC or whatever in the past. So divorced again from everything. That's great, I think.
To me, the element of the ORC that stands out, rather than being the actual, let's recreate another open gaming thing, it is very significant to note that the people teaming up include some of the hugest names. So there is no company that is as big as Wizards of the Coast in this space. But once you combine Paizo and Green Ronin and Chaosium and, any number of these huge names, you do start to get a pretty huge presence. I was going to say monolithic, but it's not a monolith. So it is interesting.
Chimera.
Yeah, a really tall chimera.
There's been an argument going around in this general discourse of whether or not a sort of coalition of small gaming companies creating a potential D&D competitor is the way to go versus people making their own system. And we can see people like Kobold Press on one side with Black Flag being like, yes, the way forward to survive turbulence in the D&D space is to band together, unite, and create something that we can all publish under so that we can have a lingua franca, a shared language of RPGs. And MCDM is very strongly on the other side, being, no, if we all create a new RPG, we've just kind of recreated the situation that this whole mess grew out of, having everyone play the same game. This has been a very interesting discussion to follow because I have a very strong opinion on it, but I also understand the other side very clearly. I think as a gamer, it's much better to have a lot of really cool RPGs that do a lot of different things because that's where a lot of the fun is. And, people who only play D&D, they do it for a reason, right? It's hard to learn other systems. They only have so much time to play tabletop games a week. They only run with players that also like to play D&D. It's hard to get a group who wants to play Blades in the Dark or Fate or Symbaroum or et cetera, et cetera. Might as well just play D&D. But as a publisher, as a game designer, I can see why it's so incredibly important for publishers to have that lingua franca. And it's exactly because of those people who really only wind up playing D&D. D&D is the shared language of our community. And if we can create different little genre dialects of it, then we're able to introduce players to cool new ideas they might not have otherwise experienced just playing, bog standard fantasy 5e without, playing this very long sort of, come to our new game. Oh, just try it, right? Like, come over here to give it a one shot. It's like, that's so much effort, so little gain when really people just want to play any RPG and the mechanics hardly matter to them. They just want to role play with their friends, and they've played D&D for so long. They've hacked it so much that they know how this sort of janky race car that they've gutted and replaced all the parts with. They know how all those little parts that they've replaced work. They don't want to have to buy a new sportier car off the rack and learn it all over again. The one they built works just fine. We love publishing for the one that they know how to run. It's good for us. It's good for them. And if we can make our own sort of fun, funky, weirdo games that people who want to find that and that stretch, my creative muscles, Ben's creative muscles, Shawn's creative muscles, all of that, that's awesome. We just can't expect them to, support a company in their publication. we might get lucky. We might take off, gangbusters. But the odds of that are so minuscule.
And if it does take off, guess what? You can't copyright rules, only the expression of those rules. What? Something we're doing really well? What's stopping Wizards of the Coast from creating their clone and putting all their marketing behind that? It is.
You just made James so stressed.
Oh,
I need a nap.
Welcome to my world. Let me share my stress with you. No, I agree. I agree with everything that James is saying, but there's always that. But there's always that one more thing that you have to lose sleep over, and I've been doing my share of that.
Oh no!
Oh yeah.
I do want to briefly touch on, so Languil in chat has said, as a consumer, one of the worst parts of this is having all my favorite creators splinter into games that I might not want to play and possibly having the community splinter too. And I just wanted to briefly touch on it and say, yeah, that's scary. It is. You're justified in those feelings. I do think that we all have to be prepared. This is a fractious time. I think the community is going to fracture. I don't think that fracturing necessarily means that it will be a bad thing. Particularly because it's fractured before. It'll fracture again. It happens in a lot of communities. But it'll just take a new shape for a while. And it's good to focus on the exciting elements of that.
Yeah, Treasure83 just put in chat as well. Another good point that I've heard a few people echo, which is, it's sometimes it's hard to play a new RPG because 5e has been so ubiquitous. D&D, throughout the history of RPGs largely has been so ubiquitous. It's actually just hard to find a table. It's hard, even if you want to play something else. I've wanted to play Infinity in particular, but it can be hard to find time and a table. But I think also, just to support what you were saying, Dael, I don't mean to parrot you, but yes, there is also exciting elements to that as well, and getting to go and try new systems, that you might not have had, you might have been putting off for whatever reason up until this point. You're more likely to probably find a Pathfinder table now than you ever have been up until this point. Yes, I'm exhausted. It's really hot in my room as well. It's Australian summer at the moment, so if you see me sweating, it's because this closed environment is not healthy for me. But we shall tarry on to some lighter news, I suppose. D&D live action TV show. Woo!
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Of all the times to announce it.
Yeah, I don't know when.
Really great timing.
This might have been announced earlier. I don't know. I picked it up. It's like the movie, but it's more episodes. So,
Can you imagine how exciting this would be if it wasn't other stuff happening? This would be how we would be starting. We would be discussing all the ins and outs of what should be in this movie and what does this movie mean for D&D, and can it bring more players in? Talking about a lack of players, what we need are more players and more game masters. And something like this could totally do that. And let's discuss that if we have 1 ounce of energy left to do so.
I mean, I'll be honest. It's on Paramount Plus. I'm not holding my breath. That Halo show was nonsensical. It was
rough. Well, that's the thing, right? Is like, I think if this was happening, as if it would have, but 10 years ago, I'd be so happy and excited about it.
Yeah.
But I feel like such a jaded geek at the moment because it feels like every property I love is being taken. They're like, let's make a TV show. And they don't care. They don't care about it. This is where all my opinionated stuff's coming out. The Halo show, the Willow TV show. What was that? Come on now. So, I maybe they'll do a great job. If they did, that would be wonderful and I'd watch it and I'd be delighted. But I find myself struggling to be excited about new geek IP entertainment these days just because it feels more and more like it's a cash grab, which it always was, but it feels more like it now.
Man, Dael, that Willow TV show. That first episode, I really liked it. And then disaster upon disaster, as soon as Warwick Davis showed up, I was like,
right.
No.
What a waste.
Good to know I don't need to watch the rest of it because I didn't particularly like the first episode either. I had wondered. Willow was a weird movie that I had seen as a kid and thought that I fever dreamed it. Like the people turning into pigs and like all that stuff was really strange for me. One of my favorite parts of that movie, though, the one joke which will always be with me, is when they're going out to like get Willow to go on the journey with the baby. And they're like, follow the dove. The dove will show you your journey. And it's like, it's going back to the village. That's like, all right, ignore the dove.
Forget the bird. Follow the river. Yeah. It's one of those movies that, like, you know, every time I was sick at home for a day, it was one of my movies that I would watch alongside the Power Rangers movie and Back to the Future. But
it's all coming together.
It's all coming together. But you know, it really feels like more and more often the people who, maybe not the people who are working on these shows, but certainly the people who seem to be in charge of these shows haven't watched and don't care about the properties. I mean, look, let me speculate about what I would like in a D&D TV show, because that's a bit friendlier. That's nicer. All right. Yeah. I would love it if they had 2 storylines going on. Here's the real world, what's going on with this kid at school, he's having a time. But also, here's his D&D game and how it mirrors the real life. I think that would be a great TV show. I think you'd get a lot out of it.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, you want to make a D&D TV show for people who aren't D&D fans. You want to make a D&D TV show for the people who liked Lord of the Rings but don't know what D&D is, or liked Game of Thrones, or liked Stranger Things, who to show that not only is this thing, this brand fun, but this culture can be fun. And that's what Dael is saying, right? How does this D&D game, other than being entertaining and funny and people with pointy ears running around, but how could it affect your life, right? We see all of these articles coming out now about role playing and how they're using games to help deal with trauma or help get across and communicate with people who may have trouble communicating, and all of those things. Have that be part of the TV show, right? Find the strengths of not just the brand, but the culture, and really emphasize that and bring people into the brand if necessary and the culture if possible.
I still say that the D&D movie ought to have pulled the same stunt. I say ought to have as if it's come out already or I can see the future. It ought to pull the same stunt that the Lego movie pulled, which is pulling back the curtain from the game and showing the real humans behind it. That's the only way that movie makes sense, because the Forgotten Realms is such a generic fantasy setting, and that's such a good thing for D&D. That's such a wonderful thing for people who just want to play some fantasy and get some characters together. And, you know, they're not authors. They're not professional game designers. They just have some fantasy archetypes in their heart and they want to have some fun. And having a kitchen sink setting is so great for that. When you're trying to build an epic story that you can hang a franchise on, I just don't know, man. That's not the heart of D&D. The heart of D&D is playing the game of D&D. And the Lego movie, because you know, Hollywood needs to have seen something happen before they're willing to invest about $1 billion in it. That's the only way anything gets done in Hollywood. That movie is proof positive that you can do pull the camera back from the fantasy and have it work, and have it be heartfelt, have it be emotive and powerful, and still have it be like a kid's movie, a popcorn movie. I don't know. I feel like I'm preemptively angry about this direction.
You said Forgotten Realms, and I suddenly felt exhausted all over again.
Is that why your face was melting?
Yeah, that's why my face was melting. Not for any particular feeling of the Forgotten Realms, but I don't think they're going to go in the direction that, you know, I agree with you, James, and sure, I think that would be a great, and Dael, whoever also said that they should pull out and make it a bit meta. I don't think they're going to do that. I think there is a good chance that they're working on the Forgotten Realms averse. And they'll try to get like Chris Pine for a cameo in the TV show if they can, and start building out there, and then start doing like multiverses. They'll do like a Ravenloft TV show that has like the druid from the movie show up for a cameo, and so it's all tied together. But these are different universes, so they're slightly different characters. And this is the dark Ravenlofty timeline.
Look at us, we're so cynical. We're so cynical. Chase in chat is absolutely correct. Says a D&D movie with Princess Bride style framing would be so much more fun.
Yeah.
Okay, if I could get something that's like the freaks and geeks, those geek kids, you know, having their life, they're struggling at school, and then also sort of like the newer Jumanji movies where you've got like The Rock as a paladin, but being basically a kid who is playing The Rock, you know what I mean? That's all I want. I just want a fun time. I just want a good time with some heartfelt moments. I don't want the Forgotten Realms-averse.
You know,
does it
every
help?
time. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Shawn.
Does it help that one of the writers and directors of the movie was in Freaks and Geeks?
Who?
Yes.
Was it John Francis Daly? Was it Grown Up Baby Sweets?
Yes. He is directing and writing the movie.
Okay,
does that help? Does that make you feel better?
In what context have I heard
Can we
Dael
salvage
say
this somehow?
Grown Up Baby Sweets? I've heard you say that before.
Grown Up Baby Sweets is what we call Johnson. It's what we call John Francis Daly in my family because we watched Bones, in which he plays Sweets, and then we watched Freaks and Geeks, and we called him Baby Sweets because we didn't learn his name, and then we loved Freaks and Geeks more. So every time we see him now, we call him Grown Up Baby Sweets.
Great. His name is a double negative. I like it. I mean, I think somebody mentioned The Princess Bride.
You should do the TV show too, as well as the movie.
I don't think that this is going to have the framing of The Princess Bride, but I think the movie was already described as being Game of Thrones meets Princess Bride or something like that, kind of meeting a Guardians of the Galaxy style vibe. I'm going to be honest.
And we should take it with a grain of salt, right? When they say Game of Thrones meets, they just mean it's fantasy.
Well, yeah. Game of Thrones, again, transcending its original form. I'm going to sound extremely pretentious, but I am a bit exhausted on the style of movie that the Marvel Cinematic Universe largely was successful with, which is that movie that's an action movie, clearly doesn't take itself too seriously, says the name of its superhero, but there's a wink to the camera to be like, oh, we know it's a silly name, wink. And then everybody is just like Tony Stark glib, you know? Star-Lord's Tony Stark glib. Thor becomes Tony Stark glib. Like everybody just becomes very glib throughout those movies. And that has, and I have no doubt that Chris Pine with his like, you know, oh, what are we going to do about it? Let's go to the tavern and get a drink. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Like Tony Stark glibness all over that.
The Joss Whedonification of Hollywood.
Sure, yeah. So I think that's probably the tone the TV show will hit as well. And I have to admit, a little exhausted on that kind of style of like popcorn entertainment.
Did you see the Netflix movie Red Notice? What was that?
No, but it's the same writer director, right? As the TV as the D&D TV show.
I wondered if anybody saw that, what they thought of that.
I did see it. I do have opinions.
You have opinions?
Share them, Dael.
They're not extremely strong or anything. It's fine. It's fine. Fluff for the brain, you know, sit down, whatever. Like if it's on TV, you probably aren't going to turn it off. But it had like 3 twist endings and none of them were great. And characters were I will now exposit my backstory to you. You know, it was very, let me tell you with my words everything that I am feeling and thinking. So it's like fine.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's the most watched thing on Netflix ever.
No way.
What?
Ever?
I've never even heard of it.
What about like individual episodes, like the first episode of Squid Games or something? You're telling me it's got more views than the first episode of Squid Games?
More views than Tiger King?
At one point, maybe the most watched movie was what I read.
Yeah,
but it was very, very, very popular. And I agree with Dael. You know, it was fine. I watched it. I'm like, okay, I wasn't
offended by it.
Right, exactly. It wasn't horrible. It had some good parts, and
would I seek it out again?
Right. Was it Citizen Kane?
No.
No.
What is?
But none of us were expecting Citizen Kane out of any of this, were we?
No, that's true. No. I mean, my I don't know whether I'm hoping for this or hoping against this, but basically one of the other party members to crouch down next to Chris Pine and say, it would be dangerous to go down into that dungeon. There's dragons in there. And Chris Pine to look at them and go, Dungeons and Dragons? well, we have to go in there now, or something like that.
That would get a laugh out of me. I have to say it. I'm a little ashamed to say it. I would titter at that.
Are we hopeful for that, or are we hoping against it? Nobody knows.
You get a sensible chuckle out of me.
Just made a really good point in chat that that Red Notice is very obviously starring The Rock, Gal Gadot, and Ryan Reynolds, all three of whom would pull plenty of audience members just by virtue of being them in a movie. Having the three of them together, maybe it is the most watched thing on Netflix of all time.
But that's exactly why I've kind of assumed that it is like, glib action kind of movie, is because those three actors, with all respect to those three actors, I don't think I've ever seen them in a Citizen Kane level kind of role, I don't know. Maybe is that throwing too much shade?
Well, clearly you haven't watched Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle.
I have heard that is good. No, I have
It's
not,
really good, actually. I do recommend it. It's a great time.
Well, speaking of great times, we got an email into podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, and you can have a great time by emailing podcast@ghostfiregaming.com if you want to ask us a question or come hang out on Twitch and ask us a question there. Talk with us directly at 7 p.m. Monday Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Monday Pacific Standard Time, or 11 a.m. Tuesday Australian Standard Time. Sam sends in a question via the email. Dael, have you seen this email?
I have. I read the email, Sam, and I have judged it, and I found it excellent. Thank you very much for your excellent email. If this is AI, then it's come a long way in a week.
Would you like to read out the question?
Sure. I mean, I could pull it up. Here we go. All right. Hello. It says, I know Dael judges email, so if this is not well written, my hope is that it will at least be entertaining. Oh, live streamed Eldritch Lorecast, to you four I now write with a question I must ask. Knowledge of varied depth and width you each possess of tabled games in journeys through dungeon or fabled myth. With unknown agents or heroes of fame, have any riddles held fast your memory? Whether your own design or a Sphinx's game, share your tales and methodologies. For crafting engaging enigmas, answers in masks, please converse on the show and share with me. Delightful.
Bravo.
And then, it's a delightful little bit of verse. Thank you very much. I would be astounded if an AI could do that. But just because it's an unusual rhyme scheme as well, I could break it down, but I won't. So anyway, they go on to say riddles are a staple of fiction, from Oedipus and the Sphinx to Gandalf at the entrance to Moria. But within tabletop RPGs, it can be a little bit tricky to make it work. Because even if you are a fan of riddles, or your players are fans of riddles, you end up in an interesting situation if people can't figure out the answer. It can become very frustrating. And they're sort of asking, do we have any memorable encounters with riddles in our games? And do we have any advice on whether it's worthwhile including riddles or ways to include riddles?
We have monsters in the game that are known for riddles. So it is generally good to have something up your sleeve if you are going to use, say, a Sphinx. I can think back to 1979 and certain adventures that used the original Sphinx's riddle in the adventure. And of course, being well-read young people back then, we knew what it was immediately. So it was sort of anticlimactic. And that speaks to one of the problems with riddles is if it's too hard, you're going to lose people. And if it's too easy, why bother? So my thought is, if you're a game master who's creating your own stuff for a group of players that love riddles or love puzzles, then go for it. Create them. If you do create them, think about the theme of your adventure. When I write adventures, I usually try to pick one or two themes and then use those as touch points. If I'm doing that, I already have an answer to the riddle ready, because that answer should be in everyone's mind, even if subconsciously, that the theme of this is diamonds. The theme of this adventure has been diamonds. I've talked about all sorts of things tangential to diamonds. So the answer to any riddle I make is going to be diamonds. That will already be in their mind, hopefully subconsciously. they will have a better chance of getting it and feel really smart when they do get it. And it fits into that theme, which may add some more depth to the adventure that you're running. If you are trying to create a riddle for a published adventure that anybody's going to play or anybody's going to run, may God have mercy on your soul.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm in a weird position, right? Because I love riddles. And, you know, I just enjoy the process of trying to figure it out. I can remember being invited onto the Bat Minute podcast when they were covering the film with Two-Face and the Riddler. And so they had this running thing where they would invite guests to answer a riddle. And I got it very quickly, and memes were made about me just being the riddle master or whatever. But I just like it. I find it very enjoyable. There was another time, another memorable one, when we were on stage at PAX playing a game run by Ben. You had a riddle door included there. And I remember I solved the riddle. It was the pirate's name. I don't remember. So that kind of covers what Shawn is saying, right? It's on theme. We've been hearing about this scary pirate man this whole time. And I don't remember. I'm very sorry, Ben. I don't remember exactly what the riddle was.
Don't apologize to me. That might have been authored by James, actually. I'm not sure.
It was.
Yeah.
Hey, the answer was the pirate's name. And I remember someone afterwards talking to me and assuming that I had been given the answer to the riddle ahead of the game, because there's no way that we would have just solved the riddle without having to roll for it, you know? But I also am on the team of riddles frequently don't make sense in your D&D game. They don't. I mean, I suppose that depends on tone. If you're running a fun one-shot for people who like riddles, what I tend to do, here's some actual advice. What I tend to do is I use lateral thinking puzzles instead, because they have the feel of a riddle, but often there is a way to figure out the solution. So a really good example is the potion riddle from the Philosopher's Stone, right? So danger lies before you while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. 1 among us 7 will let you move ahead, blah, blah, blah. But it breaks everything down in a way that you can actually solve what the answer is, which tends to be better just because it gives them a puzzle to solve rather than actually being a riddle where you either know the answer or you don't. Because you really don't want to get stuck in that situation where they haven't figured it out for ages. And then the high-end player just goes, can I just roll for it? And you're like, sure. And that's already boring. But what happens if they roll a 1, you know? It's danger.
I think that, that riddle specifically, which was on the door for, it was the first kind of part of Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse. And I think that what it did, I was not surprised, but I was glad that you got the answer to that riddle so that the live play could continue. At the same time, there are contingencies built into that, which I think are really great, that mean that the players don't have to solve the riddle, which was, I think there's a keg of black powder, which you might have found or might not, I can't quite remember. But the idea as it's written in the module is they could also use the black powder to blow the door open instead. So it doesn't have to, the riddle's not a hard, you cannot proceed forward. I think I kind of do the same thing where it is kind of, and I might have even picked this up from one of your videos, Dael, from years ago, because I remember you sort of saying in one of the videos talking about how, a riddle on a door doesn't really make much sense if you want that door to never open, for specific people.
Either give your friends the password.
Yeah.
Or it's not, yeah.
But trying to turn a riddle into a practical puzzle that can be solved, as you were talking about with the potions. I had a riddle that I read online. If your players don't watch the Eldritch Lorecast as well, feel free to use this in your game. But basically it was like a thief goes up to a door, like you're hiding near a door into like a thieves' den. And you watch the first thief go up and someone from behind the door says 6. And the thief replies 3 and gets let in. And then another thief walks up an hour later and he says 12. The question from behind the door is 12 and he says 6 and then he gets let in. And so now you have to go up and give an answer that you think is correct. And you get asked 8. The answer you should give is 6 because the implicit question is how many letters are in the spelling of this instead of whether, as your players will assume that it's being halved, right? But instead of just delivering this riddle, what I did was I had a room that had doors with a number written above the door and a number written on the door, and the third door was blank. And so to open that door, the players had to figure out what number to write on the door. It's a very little difference, but it's sort of, it gives them the capacity to describe what their characters are doing rather than just sitting there and trying to like nut out what the riddle is. So, and that's similar to the potions one in terms of like, you could give them physical potions if you wanted to go to that effort, or you could give them tokens representing the potions or whatever, so that they're physically kind of doing or describing something rather than just like trying to figure out the answer to something,
I think when it comes to riddles, if you're dead set on doing a riddle, the best way to do them is to make them non-critical. And I say this as someone who wrote that riddle for the Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse thing that Ben ran. If you must make them critical, yes, put a alternate progression path there. But if you really want to give them the feeling of, I solved the impossible riddle, which ideally that's a sort of mythological trope that you want to invoke. I solved the unsolvable riddle. Then make it optional. Make it, if it's in a dungeon setting, make it so that they can, there's only treasure behind it, some sort of special treasure that they'll feel really happy to get, but that's not what the boss is hiding behind. It's just their vault, their hoard. Or, and this is my favorite option, make it not time sensitive in any way. Have it be something that can arc over the entire campaign if it has to, and have it be some sort of secret to a bit of the villain's backstory, or to, a secret part of their home city or something like that. Some kind of thing where they can kind of gnaw on this riddle and maybe even ask NPCs for hints for 10, 20, 30 sessions if they really want to. And hey, if they forget about it, then whatever, they probably weren't as interested in riddles anyway. You created a fun little optional challenge for them, and the players who wanted to solve it had the opportunity to. And
if you do love puzzles, don't underestimate other people's hatred of puzzles.
Yes. Yes.
We worked on the D&D Open one year, a group of us, and we put in a quite complex puzzle. And these tickets were hard to get, and you would have to pay dearly to get them. And it's an 8-hour event. And we put a difficult, challenging puzzle in, and someone got up and actually left the event, said puzzles don't belong in D&D, and didn't come back. That's how visceral some people's dislike of puzzles are. So just be aware that there are folks out there who are like that.
It really is you. You got to know that your play is like a riddle if you got to put a riddle in.
There is a trick, and video games tend to do this relatively well, probably because they have a lot of set dressing to be able to do this with. James mentioned the ancient unsolvable puzzle before, of making a riddle or a puzzle feel like you're a genius for solving it, but actually making it quite easy to solve so that you don't get hung up on whatever this thing is. And Viva La Dirt League actually have a fantastic skit about this on their YouTube channel, where it's like this old wizard going, you'll get into the dungeon if you can find the 3 glyphs. He's like, is this it? Well done. All right. Well, there's still 2 more to find. And it sort of unfolds from there. But it's there is a knack to that can be very hard to fine tune.
I do want to leave our listeners with a riddle, just because I feel like we talked about riddles. You got to say a riddle at some point. All right. I don't know whether this will be, and this is just the one I have up. All right. Only one color, but not one size, stuck at the bottom, yet easily flies. Present in sun, but not in rain, doing no harm and feeling no pain. What am I? Now, some of you may have solved it here on our panel, but I urge you not to say it out loud. We can talk about it afterwards, because I want people to say in the comments what they think the answer is.
Very well. Well, I hope they can solve it quickly, because this is the end of the Eldritch Lorecast for this week. Dael, interrupt me if anybody gets it, or maybe don't.
They did, but I'll leave it. It'll be for YouTube as well.
Yeah, great.
But we do have a correct answer.
If you actually, if you send it to me, I can also put it on Spotify, because Spotify now has a thing where you can like ask a question. So we'll see if we get any answers through there. If you're listening to it on Spotify, you can answer the question. Anyway, You can join the Eldritch Lorecast. We're here every week. I said the times that we're on Twitch earlier if you want to watch live. Dante, just edit in a blue, 7 p.m. Monday Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Monday Pacific Standard Time, or 11 a.m. Tuesday Australian Standard Time. Flash forward back to the present time.
Dante, you got to use that as the sound effect.
The finest bloop, bloop, bloop technology is at our fingertips.
You can also find us on YouTube. Ghostfire Podcasts is the YouTube channel. If you subscribe there or if you follow us on Spotify or anywhere like that, it's hugely appreciated. We hope you've had as much fun hanging out with us as we have with you. And if there's anything I'm forgetting, email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. All right, goodbye. Have a good week, everyone. I've been Ben Byrne here with James Hake, Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill. See you all next time. And
good show.